Neck training continues to be an increasingly important form of training in my routine as well as that of my clients, because of the many benefits that it brings. In a previous video, I gave a thorough introduction to neck training, which is linked below, and in this video I'm going to explain some much more advanced concepts and techniques for those that wish to take their neck training to the next level. Most untrained people associate neck training with the same movements as nodding, which involves neck flexion and extension in the coronal or frontal plane, and lateral flexion and extension in the sagittal plane. I would consider this, however, a beginner's level of understanding. Instead, the neck has the ability to rotate from left to right, contract isometrically, and rotate and do much more complicated movements such as tucking in, circles, and figure eights, which opens a plethora of unexplored movements to the uninitiated. If you have not started neck training yet, I highly recommend starting with basic flexion and extension exercises in the frontal and sagittal plane, as I described in my first video on neck training, and training using manual resistance and progressing to cables over the first few months. For those that have trained their necks for at least 3 to 6 months and would like to strengthen their neck further, I would recommend beginning to introduce more variety in their neck training, as I am about to demonstrate. Two other forms of training that can be used and can be considered intermediate are isometric holds and neck rotation. For the sake of simplicity, let's start with isometric holds, as I believe this is one of the most misunderstood concepts in neck training. Many people jump straight into isometrics by doing the most difficult and challenging versions of isometric training and end up cranking their own necks and stopping isometric training altogether. Instead, like everything, progression is the key. Going straight into wrestler's bridge is a recipe for disaster, and instead, I recommend starting isometric training by applying manual pressure with your hands, starting with 2 to 3 sets for 10 to 30 seconds a couple of times a week is sufficient. Progressing into partial bridges on the wall is next, where isometric timed holds can be controlled, starting with 2 to 3 sets for 10 to 30 seconds, again a couple of times a week is sufficient. Progressing further in isometric neck timed holds would involve performing assisted bridges on a bench until you can eventually perform an unassisted neck bridge on the bench, and even then further progression can be made. Again, holding sets for 10 to 30 seconds is recommended. Now let's look at neck rotations, and I place these fourth on purpose because if you haven't done these can be rather challenging. Once again, I recommend starting neck rotating training by applying manual pressure with your hands. Starting with 2 to 3 sets for 10 to 30 reps a couple of times a week is sufficient. Progressing into plate-loaded neck rotations lying on a bench would be next. Again, performing 2 to 3 sets for 10 to 30 reps a couple of times a week is enough, and this progression could be followed with bands or cables, after which implements like the iron neck could be used. I personally use my bells of steel cable tower, as I snapped my resistance bands over winter as it got so freezing cold this winter that the bands just snapped and broke. So now I use progressive resistance using the bells of steel cable tower in my neck training, and combined with the neck flex, I get a great neck workout. Now, there are many more rather advanced methods of neck training, specifically those that involve compression training, which I highly advise against. Even as a martial artist, when I used to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we did wrestlers' bridges of all sorts. And although I have practiced this form of training, I can't get away with the wrestler's bridge and in all of its forms in my now older age of 46, so I would practice caution against these movements or not to do them altogether. Having talked about the advanced forms of neck training, I would like to end this video by just reiterating on the benefits of neck training in that it is very protective against head trauma, so quite useful for sports people. Another benefit is that it can help with posture, and many of my clients have benefited already from neck training, and I've actually even helped clients who had structural issues in the cervical spine of the neck resolved chronic pain issues through careful neck training to the point where they are now pain-free. And you can actually really see it in these images where many of these people had very bad posture. They had rounded backs, especially at the top, a rounded upper back, and they would complain about pain, consistent pain, migraines, and just being on painkillers, having seen a whole bunch of doctors that couldn't fix these issues. And through physical therapy, I've been able to help them literally set their skeletal structure in a more neutral spine, and this has alleviated their pain. And so now they're essentially pain-free and able to do much heavier resistance for it, because a strong spine and posture is necessary to be able to execute many kinds of resistance-based exercises. For those interested, my online coaching program is available through my website. So I do hope you have enjoyed this video on neck training, and if you have, please give the video a like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. If you are doing some neck training, I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts. That's it from me. This is the Golden Era Bookworm saying bye for now. Head to www.goldenerabookworm.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the Golden Era stars, merchandise and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimmick, Reg Park, and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat, and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Vince Gironda's approach to bodybuilding, his principles, and all these tips of wisdom that he has, I mean, there's so much stuff that probably hasn't been proven by science, and it will take science to prove or disprove Vince. But to be honest, these 3 books, I believe, which I call the Classic Physique Bundle, are the best books that Vince ever came out with. And they, of course, are the Wild Physique, the Master Series, and the Pro Series. Have a look at it this way. The Wild Physique, I believe, is like the ABCs of Vince Gironda's principles to bodybuilding. He teaches you the exercises and his principles. But how do you put them together? Well, the Master Series is a 14-month program of using all of these principles, all of the diets that Vince came out with, all of the exercises. And of course, the Pro Series was a book that he came out with later on, specially targeted for getting into competition. It's just these 3 books, as I call it, the Classic Physique Bundle, are Vince's best work, and available, of course, at www.goldenerabookworm.com.